the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
Mississippi State's always gotten it. They're like, we have to do the run and shoot, like Mullen and Leach. They understood the only way we can figure this out. Kentucky, they were like, we're gonna have to do an Iowa to ass team. Like, we're just gonna have to make this as awful and unwatchable. No big plays.
But before that, like the How Mummy Kentucky teams were like, we have to throw things that you've never seen before at you.
We have two extremes, and that's the thing. You have to do one of those two extremes. You can't try and build like your Georgia and have the personnel like your Georgia. You can't do that. Yeah. And so there are still some programs that fall into that trap, and you're like, what are you doing, man? What are you trying to do here? And that's honestly with Tennessee. I mean, there's a lot of people have a lot of takes on where Tennessee. What's your opinion of Heupel and watching Tennessee through 3 years here? Has it gone better than you thought it was based on when he was hired at the time in 2021?
I would be kidding myself if I didn't say yes. I mean, just on what they did 2 years ago alone, like that I think has to sort of qualify this as a successful hire. It has room still, I think, like to be a hire that's not right, and I can see a version of events where Tennessee has to make a different choice, but that doesn't make that doesn't mean Heupel was the wrong choice, if that makes sense. Like I think Tennessee has been vindicated in a decision that was not super popular at the time, was not super well regarded at the time.
People wanted Tony Elliott.
People wanted I think it was that Heupel. If I had to go back and sort of reconstruct it, I think there was a little bit of, we'd just seen Scott Frost leave UCF and do nothing. And so there was a little bit of like, well, aren't you just getting dollar store Scott Frost? I think there was a little bit of that. And there's a little bit of like, whenever you see an AD go get his old coach, if it's not a coach who's like super hot on the market, I think there is some element of like, is this just who you could get versus who you wanted? I don't know.
But Dan Mullen and Scott Strickland are still going strong at Florida.
We're going to get to Florida in a second. I'm going to answer your Tennessee question first. Yeah, I think like number one, Tennessee's just a lot more fun to watch than they were in the last conservatively 10 years. Before that. And I think that feels like the biggest accomplishment is that you watch Tennessee games now, whether you are a fan, a neutral, or someone who doesn't want to see them do well. And you have to admit, like, oh, this is a fun product that they're putting on the field. It's interesting to watch.
Are Florida fans becoming the Joker watching these Tennessee games, just enjoying
It's not quite that bad yet. It's not quite that bad yet. And I think Florida fans are too busy dealing with their own feelings to worry about Tennessee.
Wait, is there something going on at Florida that I'm missing?
There's so much going on. But here's the other thing. Like, I'm not trying to belittle Tennessee in this. Yeah. It's not necessarily that Florida fans are ignoring what Tennessee has accomplished, but we're in the middle of a 3-game losing streak to Kentucky, a team that we had a 30-year mortgage streak against before that.
I love that you're saying this because like Kentucky's making it look easy. What Tennessee has never been able to figure out, even in the last year was horrific. That took years off my life. What I had to witness in Gainesville last year.
Yes. I mean, the Florida Tennessee game is frequently stupid.
Yes.
That one was especially stupid.
2 years ago, there were Tennessee fans. Like I'm in the building, like my wife and I, like Tennessee's up. It's comfortable. They have that great end of half run. They get a touchdown late and they score like, it's like, oh, I feel good. The Ramel Keaton catch happens. And you're like, okay, they're taking care of business here. They're a play away. Like Anthony Richardson had the ball in his hand to win at the end of the game. Onside kicks and everything else. It's like Tennessee barely escaped. So their fans, it's crazy that we're going into 2024 with all the questions of Florida. Tennessee fans are still like, I don't know. Like we haven't.
Yes,
I don't feel good.
Yes, but between Kentucky owning Florida out of nowhere, everything that Georgia has built, the way Georgia has completely flipped the Georgia-Florida rivalry. Florida State rising up from, it was like, no, you were down here with us. And now you're like, have a legitimate case to be mad that you got left out of the college football playoff.
Yeah.
Like Tennessee being better, it ranks on that list, but I don't know. There's so much like, I don't think Florida fans can focus on it. Let me put it that way. I don't think that's the thing that they can be like, this is the thing that's really making me craziest at this point in time.
What's funny too, is like Tennessee all across the board, like obviously baseball just won the national title, and everything's cool. Like what they're building is like this continuity where you have it. It's a special time. I've been telling Tennessee fans, like alums and like me being a lot, like I tell them like, enjoy this, because this continuity with the president, the chancellor, the AD, and the coaches all being this synonymous and being on the same page is a rarity. Tennessee has always been like that sleeping giant where if they can get everybody on the same page, good things are possible. But like, enjoy this. I don't know how long this is going to go. I don't know how long you're going to have Vitello, Barnes, and Heupel and just operating at this level. Obviously, they've got a good NIL program. Like there's a lot of reasons as to why Tennessee is running on all cylinders all across the board right now. But I think what's fun about Heupel specifically with this fan base and why it ended up being such a great match, and I'm curious if you feel the same, is that Tennessee's fan base is just one of the more rabid in college football. And obviously winning in Neyland and walking into Neyland, it's a different experience. It's a Coliseum. Like it's not just like a field. It just keeps going up. Like when you're a player, you walk in there and you're like, wow, this is out of Gladiator 2. Like this is a wild, wild field. And I think when you have Heupel's kind of aggressive, we're going to stretch it out to like, we're putting our receivers at the sidelines. We are going to stretch you out and make life really, really hard. And you have to make quick decisions, and we're just going to beat you with speed over the top, and we'll see what happens. Like that's scary for most teams. But like, it's just, I think it meshes really well because it energizes the fan base. And I've been in so many of these games now with Heupel here where the fan base has never been louder. And I think it's just because you have this kind of excitement, and I just think it's so hard. It rattled A&M and Spencer Rattler, just like getting in his head when he was inside Neyland in the blackout and the dark unis last year. And I don't know, I just think it's a marriage that's really worked because I think the personalities mesh really well, where I think Heupel is extremely competitive and Heupel has an aggressive style offense, and the fans are very aggressive, and something about mustard bottles and golf balls, and like it's an aggressive fan base. So I think it just works all across the board.
I think you're right. And I think the other part of that is that I think Heupel, somewhat fairly, maybe somewhat exaggeratedly, it doesn't really matter, has been an overlooked coach, has not been like all the attention that Lane Kiffin gets, to use that example, like has not been extended to Josh Heupel.
Yeah.
And I think my sense is that Tennessee fans really like having a guy who is their guy and is not the guy. And that's a little different. Like I think they have a greater appreciation for, we didn't necessarily get the best coach on the market, but we got somebody who is like really happy to be here and really happy to be with us and understands what we are about. The other thing I think Josh Heupel's done really well, a lot of offensive coaches, they kind of, that becomes the whole brand. Tennessee's defense is still nasty.
Yeah.
And it has not been one of those situations where we're going to come in. Dan Mullen was a good example of this, especially in like the peak years where you'd be like, wow, this offense is like moving and we have a ton of first round, second round talent here. And the defense is not getting stops and the defense is not shaking people up. And I think that Tennessee has been able to really build an aggressive offensive identity without having to sacrifice, like, also we're really
the Lincoln Riley issue.
Yes. Yeah. Like that's a harder needle to thread than I think people realize, frankly.
And I think part of it too is like, it's tough to get the elite of elite defensive coordinators for this style. Like, cause you're going to give up a lot of points. You're going to look bad. Like you're going to be a battering ram because your defense is going to be on the field a bunch more. Like Tennessee plays with a fast tempo. Like your guys are going to have to play a bunch of snaps. They're going to gobble up yards. And Tennessee, like Tim Banks has been a good DC. Like Heupel's hired well. Like Rodney Garner is one of the best defensive line coaches in the country, and having him there is a big reason why James Pierce is maybe going number 1 overall next year. You have to hire well, and I think Brian John Marie has been a really good linebackers coach. He's now at Michigan, and I think you get William Inge, who has been a great DC at Washington. So he hires well, and I think he understands something that Lincoln for some reason just overlooked. And I think maybe part of it with Lincoln and Dan, and I think they're both great coaches, and I'm still a very pro Dan guy, is that it's just the friend thing with Grantham and Grinch. Yeah, the loyalty where you can't really have that. Like you just, and I think that's the difference with Heupel versus those three. Because I don't think Inge and Banks had a relationship prior to Banks bringing him on, and like just having those, like obviously Heupel and Garner didn't have a relationship, but it's just hiring the best people you can and also understanding your weaknesses and limitations on the recruiting trail. Like Brian Harsin doesn't realize, like you see how Hugh Freeze immediately gets Auburn recruiting back on. It's like you overthought it. Like you needed, I understand you want to bring your Boise guys, but you need to have a balance. You need to have some, you bring in some like Billy Napier's even done that a little bit, where he has his offensive guys came in from Louisiana, but the defensive side, and there are some guys like I think Gonzalez was a holdover, right? At wide receiver coach.
Yes.
So it's like you have to have that balance if you want to succeed in the SEC. You can't just bring your own guys.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan, speaking of Florida, I'm really curious because I got to tell you, I'm cautiously optimistic. Like everyone's talking about the schedule this year with Florida. I think Graham Mertz is going to have a really good season. I think Eugene Wilson III is a really, really good player. I think he's going to have a breakout year if he can stay healthy. I think Montrell will be one of the better backs in the SEC, and not having to split time with ETN, I think will be fine. I'm not that. I think people are really overlooking them because of the schedule. Like I would pick them right now against Miami at home to start the year. I think Miami's gonna be a sexy pick. I'm like, I'll believe it when I see it. Like it's just really hard to win in the swamp, and Mario Cristobal in a big game out of the gate. Like let me see it. I wouldn't be surprised if they won, but let's just see it.
Yeah.
But there's a strong chance Florida is undefeated going into Knoxville, and I'm going to just not be well all week long. And I think people are overthinking Florida a little bit. I think people are like 3-9. I understand the Vegas win total.
Yeah.
Are you talking yourself into Florida? Because I think 7-5 is actually more realistic to me than a 3-9 type year.
No, I think so. I think there is a weird split happening right now. And this is just anecdotal. I think there's the 3-9 crowd. I think that crowd tends to be a little bit more national than Florida fans, but I think there are Florida fans who are like, no, like this is not working. We should have made a change already. We're doomed. I think there's another group of Florida fans that are maybe even a little bit more optimistic than you are, that are maybe thinking like, we're not going to go to the SEC title game. We're not going to be Georgia.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.